So, so thank you so much for joining me. I'm Michelle Hennicanen. I'm a resource manager at Robert Half. I've been with us for almost 20 years, 20 years at the beginning of next year. And so today I'm going to talk about, in the second of our series of webinars we're doing, about the next part of the job search. So the interview with a prospective employer. So last time we talked about your resume helping you get a foot in the door. But at the end of the day, that doesn't get you the job. You do. And the interview is an important part of that process to show the company that you're talented, capable, you're enthusiastic. You're the person that was described in the resume that they might meet in person or via video these days more often. Gives you an opportunity to provide more information about your skills and experience. And this is really your moment to shine and show why you'd be a great hire for this organization. So we'll run through some tips to help you going forward. So some of the things we're going to cover today is testing your interview IQ, phone interviews, video interviews, preparing for video and or in-person interviews, dressing for success, and closing the interview and following up. So testing your interview IQ. How long does it take for a hiring manager to form an opinion about a job seeker? I'm not sure if anybody's able to type this into the chat at all, if they have any ideas. I don't see anything, so I'm going to let you know. One second. Oh, looks like we've got a few coming in the chat. So just give me a second because it's not, my slide seems to be frozen. So it takes 15 minutes to form an opinion. So the next IQ question, is it better to schedule your interview in the morning or afternoon, and does time matter? So does anyone have any ideas on this one? So I'm seeing mostly mornings. Someone said mornings sound more professional or prefer a morning interview. So mornings is the best time for an interview. We found that nearly 2 out of 5 executives said the most productive time for an interview is between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. So pushing for a morning meeting may be in your favor. I know some people aren't morning people, so you're definitely going to want to plan ahead and to make sure that you, if someone offers you a morning meeting, that you say yes to it. Sometimes people don't want to say yes, but definitely would encourage you to do so. And so the last question, what portion of hiring managers ask their assistants to weigh in on a job candidate? Some great tips in the chat. I like the one about morning, make the interview remember you. So I'm just looking here, 1/4 I see for this question. So 1 second. So it's actually, the answer is 69% of executives polled take their assistant's opinion into consideration, that it's super important when evaluating new hires. So they're asking often, this means the moment you walk in the door. So whether that's the receptionist, whether that's the EA that supports the person you're meeting, you want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward with everyone you meet and not just the hiring manager, because likely they are asking other individuals their opinion with regards to you. So firstly, the phone interview. This is a common way that we narrow down, candidates. It's often the first point of contact that you're going to have with a company that they decide if they're interested in you, and whether they're going to bring you in. So this is often that pre-screening process. And then they would, after the hiring manager selected the most promising candidates based on the resumes they've received, This might be the next step to sort of seeing who might potentially be moving to an in-person or video interview. This allows, a phone conversation allows the manager to gauge your skills, your personality, your enthusiasm relatively quickly, as well as your communication skills. You definitely don't want this to be a casual discussion. So you want to treat it with importance, because this could be definitely, that step where, it doesn't go well, you don't move to the next step. I know sometimes I'm calling candidates to discuss their resumes in sort of a phone interview, because often with my requisitions, I'm working under tight time frames. And sometimes when I call someone, I know that they're out. They might be on the bus, they might be in a really noisy area. And, so often people are like, well, it's okay, I can speak now. The problem is then I will have problems hearing them. I can't take notes. I can't ask proper questions. So if you're in that kind of situation, you get caught off guard, you might want to say, you know what, I'm out currently. Can we maybe set a time? Can I call you back in 10 minutes for me to get to a quieter area? So just be really cognizant of where you are when doing these. Because it is your chance to make a first impression. So if this doesn't go well, it might not go any farther. So some other tips, be prepared. So if you know in advance, you're able to prep for where you're going to be, you're able to do some research on the company, you're able to, research the position you've applied for ahead of the call, and keeping your notes handy. So with regards to the position that you applied for, it's a good idea. Perhaps if you're in the interview or often be applying to a link on the website, is perhaps cutting and pasting that job description and the title and when you applied, and maybe, putting that into a Word document, putting that into your email so you have something to refer back to. Because sometimes when you're getting called for the interview, that role is already off the website and you can't find them. And that way you're not asking the interviewer, which role did I apply for? So make sure that you're doing some of that prep. Do your homework before that interview. You want to prep as diligently as you would for an in-person meeting. Obviously, this is if it's happening. Anticipate the questions you might be asked. Think about points you want to convey to the company. Setting the stage. You want to take this call in a quiet room. I mean, this is not as common these days. Ideally, if you have a landline, is to use it. If not, if you're using your cell phone, ensuring you've got a good signal, and you're a good area that, that conversation is going to be able to continue in its entirety. Getting your message across. The hiring manager won't be able to pick up on your facial expressions, your body language. A really great thing when you're on the phone. And I know when I worked in, more of a call center environment a long time ago, you want to be smiling when you're speaking on the phone and, giving that friendly and enthusiastic lift. So paying attention to your tone, because subtle inflections can play a big role in the messages you might be sending. And know the next steps. That's as the conversation wraps up, make sure to thank the interviewer. If the hiring manager doesn't suggest an in-person interview, which they may not at that point, they might be doing their initial pre-screens. You may want to inquire about how that company plans to proceed, when you should hear something, and just prepare yourself. Make sure there's, you've looked into the company, maybe looked into the interviewer, and even afterwards, maybe reflecting back on it to see what went well, what didn't go well. So you're prepared for future interviews, hopefully with this organization, or if not with another one. So conducting the proper preparation, this is for whether you're going in person, phone interview, video. It's important to always research the company at a time. This will help connect your skills and experience to the needs of the organization. So your goal should be about, looking about basic facts about the company, where is it headquartered? What's its size? Locations where it does business. Is it just in Canada? Is it in an international organization? Is it public, private? Who, are the executives that are leading this organization? What lines of business might exist? Especially in larger organizations, they can have many, many different facets. You want to look at press releases for sure, information about recent acquisitions they might have done. Are they expanding? Has there been a recent change in leadership? And other important events that are going out there. And, try to find out some basic information about the person you will interview with. Many people have LinkedIn profiles, so this would be my first place that you might want to start. And some people might be privatized. You might not be able to learn a lot, but if you find out something and you're like, this person's been with this organization, for 15 years, they've been moving up. Maybe you're asking them a question about, their journey through the organization or what they love about working with there. So make sure you've done that ahead of time. So today's job interview is very much, since COVID, live via video. They've grown in popularity even before that, because they save time on travel expenses, especially if a candidate might be in a different city or, weather permit, issues. But they're often used now, in terms of speeding up recruitment processes and hiring decisions. And right now, just for safety, they're really the only kind of job interview that's really happening and will likely continue to be a primary tool in the post-COVID era. I suspect probably more in the earlier stages. I think, hiring managers will probably want to meet people in person at some point when things open up. So if you haven't participated in a video interview, one second. In a video interview before, you want to set up a video call to maybe practice, to learn how the lens of the computer camera works. So maybe you're setting up this call with, your friend or family member a few days ahead of time. You're using the same video platform you've used for that interview. So some people are using Microsoft Teams, some people are using Zoom. So if you haven't used it, you definitely want to practice that. Ideally, you're using it off a laptop or tablet. If the smartphone's the only thing you have, that's possibly what you're going to have to do. But this gives you some time, if you're practicing ahead of time, to troubleshoot any issues. You're checking audio levels, you're checking the lighting of the space that you're going to interview in. Maybe the time of day you're checking, depending where you're located, and if you're getting any natural light, or you're just using internal. Ensuring you have a strong Wi-Fi signal, your camera placement, set your camera so it's level or slightly higher than your head for a professional looking angle. And when it's time for the real interview, make sure that you log in a few minutes for sure. I would say at least 5 before the official start time, could be up to 10, to double check your technology still working properly, you have a good connection, and just sort of just troubleshoot in case there's any issues when you start the interview. So video interviews, you want to dress as you normally would as you do in person. So, not wearing shorts, sweatpants, a t-shirt. There's so many times during COVID, I heard from many people who have been, involved in conducting interviews, for their organizations where, people will show up in, a t-shirt that has a stain in it. And while we're working from home and many of us are much more casual, I know I am, and many people, but, for an interview, I'd recommend that, you dress up head to toe as you would if you were going in person. You've done a lot of hard work to get to this point, and you don't want to have it to all of a sudden, things go the wrong way, or you stand up accidentally and, you're in shorts. And then you want to be able to make eye contact. So our natural tendency is to look at the other person's face. But, sometimes I know I find this super tricky on video is, which way to look, which way to the camera. So practicing that. So you're being able to make the eye contact and help build the connection like you would in person. And, wherever you sit in the video interview, maintain professional posture, exactly as if you were going to sit in a chair across from the hiring manager. And, your facial expressions can convey your interest or engagement to the interviewer, especially when you're talking. So, very much a different type of interview, but still very much the same as an in-person interview. So some additional tips. You want to check what's behind you. Your webcam will pick up a portion of the background. So make sure it isn't messy or distracting. People are going to be walking by. You definitely have to take this into consideration. I know once I did an interview and someone was in their laundry room and they were just enveloped in laundry. I've had interviews where people were walking behind where that person is. So try to find a space that works. And maybe this is something you do well before you're actually going to be in an interview. Know the technology. Like we said before, you're conducting a practice run with someone to get comfortable with it. So you're able to do some troubleshooting, the ins and outs of working with it before the interview happens. Avoiding the interruptions. This is challenging if you have a lot of people at home. So you need to be able to control the environment the best you can, in the environment that you're in. So if you know that, you've got other people in your household, let them know you're going to be busy and, not to be disturbed where you are, turning off mobile phones, turning off your television, email notifications, other noise producers so it's not distracting, no radio in the background, close other programs on your computer so you're not getting pop-ups, and definitely don't try to multitask within the meeting. You want to look at the camera. It's tempting to look directly at the person you're interviewing with, but since the webcam is the top of the monitor, if you look at the person on the monitor, it will appear that you're looking at his or her chin. So sit up straight, smile during the interview, maintain, as we said, the good posture, and I think smiling really demonstrates confidence and warmth and can help you come across as enthusiastic in the interview. So here are some, things that have been submitted to us, some hilarious and awkward moments that HR managers have sent us. So the dog walked in front of the camera. Someone showed off their cat. Took a phone call. Definitely eating breakfast during the interview. I've had a few times where I've had breakfast and lunch. I'd recommend not doing that. So, do that before the interview if you're hungry, or after. Arguing, trying to ask someone for a date. So when you do this role for a long time, you get to know different types of things that might come up. So body language, video and in person. So good, an enthusiastic smile, and eye contact, whether you're in person or not. This is really, really important, and helps you come across, and sort of bad. So obviously when we meet in person again, and whether handshakes will be a thing, who knows, after all of this, they might be, but if you do, you don't want to have a weak handshake. You want to make sure you've got good posture in the interview, that you're not, your gaze isn't downwards, that you're crossing your arms, that you're constantly foot tapping. When you're going to an interview, know your background inside and out. That is your experience. So make sure that you don't have to read your resume throughout that interview. That when someone asks you a question about it, you're not, looking through it for the answer. Like, know your background. So do the prep work before the interview. So we asked senior managers how different types of body languages tells them about a candidate during the interview. And employers said 17% of candidates display negative body language during an interview. So respondents identified eye contact as the most telling nonverbal cue when meeting applicants, rating it 4.41 on the scale. This is followed by posture and a handshake. Body language isn't the only thing that's being judged, but it could definitely be part of the equation. Employers are looking for candidates that are, confident, display professionalism, show an interest in the position and confidence. Nonverbal cues can be distracting and leave a bad impression. So, if it comes down to two very qualified candidates, one has negative nonverbal behaviors, maybe the other person is getting that job. And so you can see some of the lower ones: hand gestures, facial expressions, fidgeting, and habitual movements. So whether you're, doing your interview on the phone, and video, in person, you want to be preparing for definitely some standard interview questions. They will keep you from drawing a blank, digressing, leaving out important details, and otherwise just flubbing the answers that you have. So here are some common, interview questions that you might come up with. What do you know about our company? Absolutely make sure you have research and you know about the company you're interviewing with. If you go blank on this question, I don't know if the interview is going to go that well. You definitely want to make sure you're prepared. What are your strengths and weaknesses is a very common one. What interests you about this job and what skills can you bring to it? What are your most significant professional accomplishments? So if you're just starting out your career, you may not have them from the workforce. You might have to refer back to, your education, your school projects. Why did you leave your last job and what have you been doing since? You will definitely be asked this. You'll be asked potentially about gaps in your resume, and you want to be honest about them. And what sort of work environment brings out your best performance? So you could, use these questions, write some stuff down to think about it, and work through that. You might want to role play them with a friend if you're comfortable doing so. So you can see how maybe that comes across to the manager and whoever is interviewing you. So as you prepare the answers, remember to focus on your skills and experience that relates most directly to this open position. You want to come across as confident, but you never want to take it too far. You don't want to boast about your, abilities. So for example, I was the best employer worker ever that my past company had ever had. You don't want to come across in the interview as being too arrogant or someone that's going to have difficulty collaborating with others or getting along with others. But at the end of the day, you definitely want to be yourself because an employer wants to get to know the real you, to ensure this is the person they're going to see, especially these days via video. But when you come to the office, the person they interview is the person that's going to be joining their organization and their teams. And last thing you should do is try to guess what the interviewer wants to hear. What they really want to hear is the real you. So be yourself. So you might get off the wall interview questions and, to maybe throw off your game, to gauge if you're a fit for the culture, maybe to see how you think on your feet. So here are some that, we've heard. If you were having a dinner party and could invite 3 famous people, who would they be? What classes did you like in high school? What is the last book you read? So if you write on your resume, some people put interest. If you write that you love to read, make sure you're prepared for this question. Because I've seen it where maybe people have said this, and then when they ask them what book they read, they draw a blank. What would I find in your refrigerator? What did you want to be when you're 10 years old? So answering off the wall questions, just a few tips, thinking before you speak. Sometimes the first idea may not be the appropriate answer. So take a minute, moment or two to compose your thoughts. If you need to ask for some clarification from the hiring manager, do so. Using humor and taking a lighthearted approach can be a good way to build rapport, but be careful. Answering every question with a joke might give the impression that you don't take that meeting or maybe work seriously. Remembering your delivery. Hiring managers are taking notes of how you formulate these responses to get a sense of your thought process, creativity, your approach to problems. Remain calm, maintain eye contact, and answer the questions as confidently as you can. And don't throw in the towel. Like, you may think you've blown the answer, but don't give up. The hiring manager might have a totally different impression of your performance. The key to this is excelling and giving honest and thoughtful responses while keeping your composure. So keep in mind the interview is a chance for you to learn more about the company and determine if the position is right for you. You want to be asking smart questions. This can really impress the hiring manager by reinforcing interest in the job and proving that you've done your research. So, what are the top 3 tasks you want the candidate to tackle once they're hired? Is there room for growth or advancement? What happened to the person who previously held this role? Like I said earlier, why do you choose to work here or keeps you here? And the company's long-term outlook. I think it's really, really important to always go with questions. If you don't ask questions at the end of the interview, the person interviewing you might think you're really not interested in that organization or the job. So things not to ask about during the interview, so it doesn't hurt your chances. So, and definitely in the first interview, you want to avoid questions about salary, about benefits, on vacation plans and vacation time off. So, save these questions for when you're later in the process, and well, that employer is, looking at potentially, making you an offer and you're much farther in that stage. So dressing for success, I alluded to it a bit earlier, video and in person. You want to make sure that you make a great first impression. And so I think this is absolutely key for any interview that you're going to be on camera or in person. Wearing an outfit that fits well, shoes that are in good condition if you're going in person, that they're clean, they're polished, well-heeled if you're still wearing heels. Small details, but these make a big difference. When selecting your outfit, avoiding things that are loud patterns, they might be mismatched, large jewelry, things that might be distracting to the interviewer, avoiding anything torn, faded, inappropriate, no t-shirts, jeans, sneakers, flip-flops, nothing too clingy or sheer. So you just want to, have sort of a professional outfits for your interviews, and I think a suit and tie for a man, a suit or, a dress, for a woman or pantsuit or something, is definitely the right way to go. I think, when in doubt, it's better to dress up more than underdress. You don't want to be in a situation where you're feeling really, really uncomfortable that you didn't dress up, especially if the interviewer is. I mean, the interviewer may not be as much now that they've been from home, but at some point we will have in-person interviews. So closing the interview, you want to close on a positive and upbeat note and leave the interviewer with a strong impression and feelings about your qualifications and personality. Most importantly, you don't want to fall victim to the myth that by showing enthusiasm for the job, you weaken your chances of being hired. Playing it cool is good in a poker game, but not so much in the job search. So on the other hand, there's a few things you can do at this point that will harm your chances of getting an offer. So avoid playing games such as bluffing. Don't tell the interviewer that you need a decision soon because you have other offers. Even if it's true, it often backfires. Asking for interview critique. Interviewers are not career counselors. It's not necessarily appropriate to ask for that, and how you could do better in an interview. I'd recommend if you're looking to think about it afterwards, reflect back on what went well, what didn't go well, what would I change for next time. Write it down so you can remember it. Demanding an immediate decision. It will not only make this person feel uncomfortable, it may undermine everything that went well in the interview up to that point. Asking for names of other people, to contact for job leads. Unless it's abundantly clear that both of you are in a position that the position is not for you, this question would definitely be inappropriate. So following up, proper post interview etiquette will further improve, your odds of maybe getting a second interview or moving to an offer or perhaps leading to another position. So you want to make sure you take the following steps to accomplish several objectives. Express your appreciation for the opportunity. I think you should do this with every call you interview you have. Some people started off at the beginning as well and then thank them for the time at the end. Make sure you're reinforcing your interest in the job. Restate the value that you can bring to the organization and clarify any unanswered questions or address any concerns by the interviewer. Plus, hiring managers definitely like this. So 66% of executives that we surveyed said it is helpful for a job candidate to send a thank you following an interview. Email is a preferred method, according to some executives we surveyed. A handwritten note is also a popular method. Definitely don't send a text. Only 4% of HR managers polled said it was appropriate to send a text through a thanks through text message. I definitely think email is highly used, but I think you definitely want to make sure whether you're sending an email or a handwritten note that it's very timely, that you're doing it sort of right away. Make sure if you're sending this to double check the spelling and grammar. Have you spelled their names correctly? Absolutely make sure you check it. So you don't send something that's got errors in it, because if the interview went well, that might be enough to disqualify you at that step. So like I mentioned, crafting a professional post interview thank you. You don't want to delay following up with a thank you, definitely within 24 hours of the interview, so that you're top of mind with that hiring manager. If you're mailing it, I mean, you have to factor in for the mail. If you've done it in person, perhaps you're taking a thank you card and you're leaving it in your bag and you're going to craft that and maybe just drop it at the receptionist before you leave the building. If you've interviewed with more than one hiring manager, you send a thank you note to each person. Sometimes if it's a joint via email, when I send thank you notes for my candidates to them, sometimes it's just addressed to the two of them or three, depending how many interviewers they are. So you can definitely, if you're working with a recruiter, talk to them if you're going to craft it. If you're going to send it to different hiring managers, different ones, you want to make sure that you've slightly changed them, because they will likely compare notes. Be specific, reference particular points from the conversation. So, if the employer mentioned the position calls for strong knowledge of Excel, highlight the advanced training you took on the program, highlight that, you were building macros, get into that kind of details. Don't ramble, keep your message to a paragraph or two, or a few minutes on the phone. and ask for a second opinion. Trusted friend or colleague. Have them read over the thank you note to help you, spot unclear language, the typos, the grammar, before you hit send and it's too late. So recovering from interview mistakes, put yourself in the following scenarios. You built ample time to arrive early, but Murphy's Law strikes and you get a flat tire. You're going to be late. So the solution, you always want to make sure if you are going to be late, that you call the interviewer as soon as you realize you're not going to make it on time. Explain the circumstances, provide an estimate of when you'll arrive, apologize for the inconvenience. A lot of hiring managers will understand if it's innocent and unforeseen mishap happens, they might have to reschedule. But it's best to actually address it. I've interviewed thousands of people over my career, and sometimes people would arrive late and wouldn't even acknowledge it, wouldn't call, wouldn't say anything to the receptionist, not even, say anything to me. So I really think, you really need to address it and apologize. But definitely, yeah, building ample time. If you're a commuter in the Toronto area, things can go wrong. It can take a long time. But, if you're going to go to an interview, probably, factor 2 to 3 times what you normally would to make sure things go well. And, even if you arrive early, you can sit somewhere, you can grab a coffee, you can go prep for your interview. You're not rushed and frazzled by the time you get to the interview. And then definitely, if it's, via the video that you're getting on early, to try to troubleshoot in case you have to message that interviewer. So you notice a stain on your neatly pressed shirt just before the interview begins. So you want to stay calm and confident. First impressions definitely matter, but I don't think the stain is going to sink your chances if all of a sudden, it's something that maybe happened en route. Maybe you spilt your coffee on the GO train. You even make a lighthearted, self-deprecating joke, using the stain as a vehicle to break the ice and display that you can roll with the punches attitude and a sense of humor, and that it doesn't get you down. You may gain a bit of empathy, maybe a bit of laughter, and building some rapport. So you fumble your first response by referring to the company by the wrong name, or maybe the interviewer by the wrong name. So maintain your composure, quickly correct yourself, weave the right name into the subsequent answers, stay positive, remind yourself that everyone misspeaks. At times it happens, we get nervous, we're in a new environment, meeting new people. And I think everybody in their career has had some sense of nervousness for sure. It's important to realize that even if you feel the interview went poorly and you don't think you have a shot at the job, your perception of your performance may be vastly different from when the actual interviewer's assessment of you. We tend to be our own worst critics of ourselves. And a swift recovery from a mishap can actually work in your favor, showing the prospective employer you can handle tough situations, you can quickly bounce back from setbacks, you can think on your feet. So definitely, not all is lost. So some real life interview mistakes. A job applicant came in for an interview with a cockatoo on his shoulder. The candidate had his sister to interview in his place, or bringing a family member to an interview. One candidate saying their responses. Someone handcuffed themselves to a desk. So definitely there are some different things that might happen. Make sure that you are the one going to the interview. Yeah. And thank you so much for joining us today and running through these tips. And as you can see, my email is here. So if you do want to connect and send a resume, you can send it there. And you can also look me up on LinkedIn and even pop me an invitation there, letting me know that you attended this webinar. That's really, really helpful to me. I get a lot of emails and requests. So it's super helpful if you can refer back that this is where we're connecting from. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. So I like to direct everyone to your Q&A tab if you do have any questions, so you can start putting them there. I do have questions coming up here, so I'll start reading them out loud. For everyone looking for the Q&A tab, it should be at the bottom of your screen, and you can start typing your questions there. So the question here is, how do you submit a resume to Robert Half in Toronto? I guess, like, do you just go online? Do you ever talk to somebody?
Some people submit it via our website. So for example, like some people submit it directly to a job posting. Like I have some few job postings out on the web, and someone wouldn't know it was my posting, but I'm able to go in and review resumes from there. I often get a lot of resumes just via my posts on LinkedIn, via my referral network, but definitely applying via the website is a way to do so. And the job order, you might be able to send it directly to someone's email potentially. You really have to look at the posting and read through it. Sometimes someone's email is in there. But definitely someone can create a profile on our website.
Thank you. Our next question here is it okay to write notes during an interview? Maybe, yeah, like can you take a notebook in there?
I don't know whether I would take notes. I think it could be distracting. Then you're not making eye contact with the hiring manager directly. I mean, you might bring, a notebook where maybe you have some questions you want to ask, and that would show that you're well prepared. But I don't know if it would be like, when you go to school and you go to a class or a webinar and you're taking notes. I think that might be a distraction, to that process. If you've got to take some notes afterwards because you want to reflect back on things and how it went, or maybe interview questions you could have prepared for, you can do that.
Thank you. Why is it not best practice to email all of the interviewers in one email after the interview, just to like a thank you email?
I mean, I think it's, preference, maybe you had different discussions with different people and you want to highlight different things. So for example, some interviews might be the hiring manager and some might be with maybe a subject matter expert, like, from a project team. So maybe for that person, you want to really, highlight some different things. I mean, often when I have candidates sending thank you notes, which I'm sending, to, a client via like a back, like, behind the scenes channel, sometimes the candidate is sending, one to both, because I often may not have their email addresses. I'm sending it to someone who can forward it on. So chances are they're just addressing, the people in one interview. So it's up to you, but just make sure you're using the right names, they're spelt correctly, when doing so.
Thank you. Is Robert Half only in Toronto, or are they also like in other places in Ontario, like Ottawa?
Yeah, we have offices. We have 7 offices in the greater Toronto area. We definitely have an office in Ottawa, Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, I think Winnipeg. I'm not sure if there's some smaller offices in some of those centers. I work out of our downtown office when I went to work. But yeah, we definitely have offices all over the US and as well other places in the world too.
Thank you. How do you stay calm in an interview? Like, if you're stressed out, how do you snap out of it?
I mean, I think that, you want to just maybe take a moment, if all of a sudden you're getting a little bit flustered, say, maybe I need to take a moment just to think about this. I think the interviewer definitely knows. They've probably been in interviews where they felt the same way. And sometimes it's, maybe just quietly taking some, some deep breaths just to calm yourself down. Slow your speech. So, sometimes when we get nervous, we might start to speak really quickly. So definitely, I mean, I think that, it's okay to ask, I need a minute to think about that, this question and stuff like that. So, and then I think it's going to come with practice, as you do more and more interviews, I think, the nerves will become a little less so.
Thank you. When someone's asked a question about a professional achievement, how do you answer that question without sounding arrogant?
I think this is going to be much more in the, the interview, the body language, the language used. When we spoke, we're like, I was absolutely like, the best salesperson they've ever had. Like, no one can do this job better than me. Where it comes across a little bit like, cocky and egotistical and stuff like that. So you just really want to, think about those answers. People often get hired for skills, but maybe get fired for the inability to get along, to create drama in the workplace. And, this is stuff they might be assessing in an interview, to see, is this person going to be a good fit with other people on my team?
Thank you. This is a bit off topic from interviews, but should we be writing a cover letter for every job that we apply to?
I think definitely if you're applying to organizations is a good way to sell and highlight your skills, show your writing skills, highlight some stuff that might not be in your resume, maybe some of the softer skills. So I think that's really, important. I don't necessarily read cover letters, and partially I don't have the time to often. But definitely if you're applying to an organization directly, where that hiring manager may be getting lots of resumes to review, that might be something that sets you apart, from other candidates. And you want to be changing it. If you're applying to the same job at all organizations, you don't want to send the same cover letter.
Thank you. It says that, when there's job descriptions, obviously it doesn't say who the interviewer will be or who the hiring manager is. How do you find out who will be interviewing you? And is that important to know?
Chances are you will find out when you actually get an interview. So even for me, when I'm presenting candidates, I might not know who the hiring manager is. I will find out if my candidate gets an interview, which I will share with them so they can, prep and stuff like that. If you're getting a video invite, you're going to get an invite probably from the hiring manager directly or the HR manager. So you're going to have that person's name. I mean, there is the odd time where maybe someone hasn't shared it and it's a bit of a surprise. I know that's happened the odd time with my candidates, but it's not for not inquiring and trying to get that information. It just wasn't maybe shared. So, but yeah, you're probably not going to see it on an actual job posting ever.
Thank you. So people are, I guess, still inquiring about the recording of this webinar. This webinar is being recorded and you will get an email sometime tomorrow with the recording link, or you can use the link that you used today to join the webinar to watch it again in a couple of hours when the recording is ready. What's the best timeline to email for a follow-up on an interview?
Well, I think you want to inquire with the interviewer on what their timeline is. Like, are you the first person being interviewed in, a series of interviews that might happen over a couple of weeks? So then the follow-up might be later on. Are they doing all the interviews over the next couple of days, and maybe you can follow up, later in the week. I think you definitely want to ask that.
Thank you. If if someone's asked about your last job's accomplishment, is it okay to talk about it even if it's from a few years ago? There might be an employment gap.
Yeah, I mean, if that's what, where your last job and the accomplishments from, of course you're going to talk about it. Some people have gaps, in their resume. Sometimes it's, they've lost a job. Sometimes people have to take time away from the workforce. Excuse me. For personal reasons. So, definitely, even if it's a few years back, you might have to refer to it, if there's, accomplishments, maybe you've been in school, maybe in this time that you've been away, in the gap, whatever the gap is, you want to be able to talk to what you've done too. You will probably be asked. So, if you're taking, courses, if you've upgraded your skills, definitely this is stuff you might want to be sharing as well.
Thank you. What are the chances of somebody actually getting an interview call just by applying on a website like Indeed, or as compared to actually being referred from an employee of a company?
I think it's going to depend on, who's in the pool of candidates and whether the candidate, has the experience for the job they're applying for. I mean, you have to look at the jobs you're applying for. Do you at least have some of the, requirements of it? I don't know percentages, I have candidates apply to me, that I'm presenting to jobs, and some candidates get selected for jobs and some candidates do not. And it might just comes down to who, is in the pool of the candidates the manager has met and is interviewed. And sometimes it comes down to who is the strongest fit for that particular role.
Thank you. Can you ask for business cards of the interviewers at the end of the interview?
You can sometimes they will share them, sometimes they won't. If you interview, like for us, you would send, all correspondence would go through us. So make sure if you're working through a recruiter, you're discussing that with them. So.
And what that is, sorry. What are some of the resources to prepare for situational questions?
I think you want to go online, think about some questions you've had in the past to prepare. We have a blog online. So if you go to the Robert Half website, you might find some useful tools there to take a look at. But I think, thinking about situational questions, often when, candidates are going to interviews with customer service position, they're very often asked, I would say probably every customer service interview I know someone's gone on, they're getting asked about, how do you deal with an irate customer? So if you're applying for that kind of role, maybe that's something you need to think about, situations that you've done. How did you deal with them? And prepping in advance.
Will an interview evaluate you based on the resume that you submitted or your LinkedIn profile?
I would suspect most in this day and age, a lot of people are going to go to check out your LinkedIn. Hiring managers are going to Google you. They're going to see what comes up under your name, your social media, that kind of stuff. So you want to make sure your resume matches your LinkedIn. You might not include all the details, but you've got to make sure the dates, the titles, make sure they're accurate. Make sure they're accurate on what's on file where you work. Because when we go to do a reference, if we can't verify that and get the proper reference, you might not be able to move forward in the next steps in your offer. So really, really important that that information is accurate. People are often changing their titles because titles that exist one place, might be different than here. But I've had some candidates run into problems where that's been the case and it's led to them not getting an offer they might have gotten otherwise.
Thank you. How do you respond to a question if you're not sure of the answer?
I think you want to, maybe take a second to think about it, or, even just say, what, I just need a minute to think about this. If they're asking like a question about, to gain your knowledge about something you don't know, then I think you need to be upfront about it. You don't want to go in and, make up an answer because that person might be a subject matter expert. So for example, I see many resumes where people say they're advanced with Excel. And then they've actually gone to an interview and they've been quizzed on how to build a macro, how to do all this complex stuff. And they blank because they actually don't, they might know some concepts that they're advanced at, but they're maybe not, what that client thinks so. So, if there's something you don't know, knowledge wise, be very upfront, maybe it's something I still need to develop and learn, or I'm excited to learn this.
Thank you. There's some people who experience the issue with not having either Canadian education or Canadian experience. How can they get past that barrier?
I mean, I think it takes time. Many people when they come here, they hear the success stories, and there's definitely some for sure where people, have moved, they land their dream opportunity. It's, similar to what they did back home or what they're looking to get into. But, realistically, sometimes it is taking a lot more time. So definitely patience, continue to, while you're, trying to get into the job market, maybe you're taking some webinars online, you're attending ACCES, you're getting some of this knowledge about the Canadian market. You're starting to build your network, applying for jobs, when we could, going to in-person, events, job fairs, networking, starting to build those relationships. I've worked with many newcomers over the last almost 2 decades. And, many of them have gotten their first job, here. With the lack of Canadian experience, it's because they had the experience for the role that they were hired for. And that experience was gained before that. So sometimes it takes a bit of time, definitely a bit of patience. And eventually you're going to find someone that's going to, see the value in your experience and give you a chance. And maybe maybe you're not starting in the job, level that you were back home. Maybe you're starting, in another, role or something that's related for your cross skills. And many candidates, they're starting in something that's not even in the field they're in. And that's okay. Like, I know many individuals that have started, working in stores, working in Tim Hortons, working in, sort of the service and retail area, but they're gaining, improving their communication skills, their customer service and other skills. So don't discount that.
Thank you. And is it okay to connect with an interviewer on LinkedIn before the interview?
I would suggest not. I don't know that they might take that as being a little bit assertive. The interviewer, may not have, certain people in their network, and that may put them in an awkward position.
If you are selected for a job and you don't decide not to take it, what's the best way to let the interviewers know about it, but you don't want to burn any bridges?
I think just, being upfront, calling them, emailing them, don't ghost them. That's the worst. Because then, you know what, the industries are small here. People know each other. I work in financial services roles. That industry, people often work in it for life. And, it might not be uncommon for someone to check in with someone that they know worked at that company because that person's their friend. And people, move from organizations. So, if you haven't left, that decline on a positive note, and all of a sudden that manager goes to another organization that you're applying for, it might lead to you not getting an interview or not moving forward in that process. Relationships really, really matter, and handling things, professionally, are really important.
Thank you all for your questions, and thank you, Michelle, for answering so many. We do have quite a few questions here, but you do have Michelle's information on the screen in front of you. So if you can jot that down, you feel free to email her if you have any questions. I'll do one quick question at the end. The interview questions, everything about interviews that we talked about today, Michelle, is that only specified for an office environment job interview, or would they be suited for all sorts of interviews?
I think these sort of questions you would experience whether you're doing probably more, video or in person. I mean, you might get them on the phone, but often the phone is just that initial sort of pre-screen that might be an HR type of interview to move to the next step. I think it just depends, but you want to be prepared for anything. A good interview will hopefully move you to the next stage. If the opportunity is right and you're the right candidate, but a bad interview can really end the process, and not being prepared.
Thank you. Thank you so much again, Michelle. So everyone, you do have Michelle's information. Feel free to reach out, or you can email me as well, and I can forward your questions to Michelle. Michelle, is there anything you'd like to add before I move on?
I think just, prepare. Like that's the biggest thing in the job search. It is a full-time job often. So, definitely, and when you go out there, be yourself, and let your personality shine, and make sure to, if things don't go well, reflect on it, for next time. I think that's a really important process. I think people often know what doesn't go well. It's so hard to get feedback. If you're not selected for a job, you're often not getting interview feedback from that. It just means, there is maybe a stronger fit in the candidate pool. So I think for sure the self-reflection and, preparing for next time is something you can do throughout your career. And hopefully we'll see you next month at my next webinar.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Yes, so please watch out for webinars for Michelle's next webinar next month. Until then, I'm going to quickly just go over, we've got our next webinar coming up on August 31st, which is a Tuesday, a newcomer's guide to finding accommodation in Canada, brought to you by RBC. And for people interested in our bridging programs, please go online to our website, click on get a job, or looking for a job, or anything that you see of that sort. It will lead you to our programs pages. And if you are interested in practicing your English conversation skills with a group of people online, you are more than welcome to attend our Talk English Cafe as well. And if you'd like someone to help you with your job search, just call your closest ACCES location and an employment consultant will be able to help answer your questions and help get you started with your job search. If you are still overseas and you have your PRs and you will be landing in Canada in the next few months, please email cec@accessemployment.ca to see if you'd be eligible for any of these pre-arrival programs. And thank you again. Please follow us on our social media to find out what's happening here at ACCES. We are virtual currently, so and there are tons of virtual opportunities to network and to attend job fairs online and more. So follow us on our social media on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you all for attending, and a very big thank you to Michelle again.
Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the summer.